Welcome everybody. Today we are going to talk about colors and randomness for Arduinos and the RGB matrices we're working with. You can see that I've got some code up here on my screen. I'm going to make a new sketch at the beginning of this video. And I am going to do the same thing I'm doing in all these videos. I'm going to copy the setup code, including the setup function, into my new sketch. And I'm going to copy a couple of lines of code that remind me how to actually draw to the matrix. Let's see, I don't have it in this sketch, so I'm going to grab it from a different one. And that's just so I'll have all the tools I need to work with the matrix right in front of me. So I'm going to copy these out. I'm going to close these sketches as I'm doing that, and then I've just got the one that I'm working with. So we're going to talk about randomness and colors today, because those are two things that you're going to want to use as you sort of progress in your programming with the matrices. So let's say I wanted to do something pretty straightforward. Let's say I wanted to fill my entire matrix with random colored pixels. And I'm going to need to use two new things to do that. The first new thing I'm going to need to use is something called nested for loops. So if I want to cover every pixel in a line, I would write something like this. Which is a for loop that is going to start out with x at 0. It's going to go up to 31, and it's going to increment by 1 every tick. And so I could say something like matrix.drawPixel. My y value is going to be x value is going to be x, y value is going to be 0, and I'll just draw them red. And so that is going to draw the entire top line of the screen as red. If I do matrix.showPix or matrix.show at the end, that should give me one red line at the top of my matrix. So I'm going to go ahead and upload that and make sure that it's doing what I think it is, and make sure that the matrix I've picked out works, et cetera, et cetera. So I am uploading it, and when I finish uploading it, I should see a red line on the top of my matrix, which I do. So let's say I wanted to draw 32 red lines, right? I wanted to fill the matrix up with red pixels. Now I could do something like this, not like that. I could do something like this where I'm copying and pasting every line of code, and I'm going 0, 1, 2, 3. That's something we've done before, and it's also something that should indicate to us that we actually should be using a for loop. So we can use a for loop inside of a for loop, because what I want to do, I've got my x's increasing by 1 every time. I also want to get my y's increasing by 1 every time. I'll show you how that's going to work. I'm going to wrap this whole thing in another for loop. I'm going to say int y equals 0, y is less than 32, y plus plus. I'm going to open up the for loop here, and I'm going to end the for loop after the other for loop. So now this second for loop is inside of my first for loop. And I will sort of walk you through what that is going to do. Well, this isn't going to do anything because I have not added my little curly brackets in successfully. Okay, that's what it should look like. So this outer for loop is going to run 32 times. The first time I go through it, y is going to be equal to 0. And as soon as it gets inside of this, it's going to hit this for loop. And so while this inner for loop is running, y is equal to 0 the entire time. So for y equals 0, I'm going to go from 0 to 31 on x. Then I'm going to finish that. I'm going to get out here, and I'm going to increment y to 1. For y is equal to 1, I'm going to go through this entire for loop from x is equal to 0 to x is equal to 31. And so I'm going to put a little, I want you to see how this is going to work. I'm going to ask you to write this code on your matrix as well. I'm going to put a little delay in here of 100 milliseconds. And I'm going to matrix.show at the end of every single one of these pixel draws. So when I upload this to my matrix, I'm going to get a line that starts at y equals 0. Oh, that's not going to work because matrix does not name a type, which means that I've got I've got too many curly braces down here. If you get an error which is difficult to parse, like matrix does not name a type, generally it means you've got the wrong number of curly braces or brackets. That can really, really confuse the compiler, and it'll start to give you errors that are kind of difficult to understand. So I'm going to run this, and what I should see is red pixels going across the top of my screen, which is the inner loop, jumping down one, going across the screen, et cetera, et cetera. That's actually not what I'm seeing here. So let's take a look. Oh, obviously, I'm not using my y value, right? I'm doing x comma 0 instead of x comma y, so I'm going to upload this again. And presumably this time I will see the right thing, which is pixels slowly marching across the screen. So I've got the top line. I've got the next line, and it's going to continue doing this. Please upload this code and make sure that this works. And the reason I am having you upload it in this way is it's a visual representation of what's going on with these loops. The pixels going across the screen are this inner loop, and every time it goes down one, it's this outer loop increasing by a single pixel. Now, let's say we want to do something a little bit more interesting with the color. We don't want to fill in all of our pixels in red. We want to fill in all of our pixels in a random color. And so that's actually pretty easy to do. We can do that by creating these little variables in here. We're going to create a pixel r, and we're going to set it equal to this particular line of code. So rand, this is a function that gives you a random number. It gives you a random number that is generally very, very, very large. So in order to get that to, because I don't want just any random number. I don't want a random number between 1 and 4 billion. I want a random number between 0 and 255 because I'm working with a color. So the way you work with this in C++ is you say, give me a big old random number, and then I am going to get the remainder when I divide it by a certain number. And so this is going to give me the remainder when I divide it by 256, which is going to be somewhere between 0 and 255. Why it works this way is probably a little bit out of scope for what we're talking about. But if you want a random number between 0 and x, you do rand %, x plus 1. So I'm going to do pixel g. I'm going to do the same thing. And I'm going to do pixel rg, pixel b. And this is going to give me a random number between 0 and 255 in each one of my pixels. Now, I'm not going to use my red down here anymore. I'm going to use matrix .color565, which is just a function that gets the color in the right format for the matrix. Pixel r, pixel g, pixel b. And I have to, I've made an error here. I'm going to show you what that is in just a second. I have to declare what type of variables. These are all ints, which is our number variable. So, and every time it hits this, it's going to redeclare these variables, right? These don't persist outside of the for loop, but that's okay. I'm using them immediately after, and then I don't care about what their values are. If I went outside of this for loop and I tried to do something with these values, these variables wouldn't exist. They stop existing anytime you create a variable in a scope, which is generally something that exists between curly braces. It's going to go out of scope as soon as you hit the end of that curly braces, and that means it stops existing. Okay, so I'm going to upload this code to my matrix, and by this point, my entire matrix is filled with, I've talked long enough that my entire matrix is filled with red pixels. So now it is filling in a bunch of random colored pixels. And you'll notice that these are going to be pastels. For whatever reason, I don't really understand why. If you generate random RGB tuples, the colors you come out with are sort of bright pastels. So we are going to introduce a new way to work with color. And I'm going to keep this random. I'm going to keep this nested for loop up here. I just want to get some different colored, random colored pixels on here. And what we're going to do is we are going to work with a color space called hue, saturation, and value. So red, green, and blue is a different color space, and it's really, really obvious how it works. You have a certain amount of red, a certain amount of green, a certain amount of blue. You add them together, and you end up with a color. And if you randomize all of them, you get these pastels. So there's also a color space called hue, saturation, and value, HSV. And hue is the color. Saturation is whether it's fully colored or washed out, sort of gray. And then value is how light or dark it is. When I'm working with hue, saturation, and value, I usually only care about hue. And so I am going to say, instead of pixel R, pixel G, and pixel B, I'm going to say int pixel hue. And hue, in the way we're going to use it here, goes between 0 and 65535, I think. Let's actually find out. There's a little hint if I type in draw pixel x comma y. And there's a function called matrix.color HSV that I should get a little hint for. Oh, my IDE is not helping me out here. Let's try pixel hue. I think you just need the hue. Let's see if this works. Usually I get a little bit of, yeah, it's 65535. That's what it is. So we want 65536 because we want to go one below. So this should give me random colors. Usually the IDE will give me a little bit of help here. It's not doing that right now. That's okay. We're just going to try it out. The reason it's not giving me help is because I missed a semicolon. So I've got another problem here. Draw pixel was not discarded. Oh, it's matrix.drawPixel. So if the, there we go. Now I'm getting all this help that I was expecting before. So I'm going to erase this, and I am going to take a look at what it's telling me. Okay, hue is from 0 to 65535. That's what I thought. So I'm going to use pixel hue in here, and I think that's all I need. So let's see if this works. This is a little bit of no. Oh, yeah, I got to get rid of this line. Okay, one last time. So this should fill the matrix with randomly colored pixels in the HSV color space, and it's not doing anything. All right, so hue is, let's see, I'm trying to read this and it keeps on disappearing. So this is what I would recommend you do when you're not sure how something works, is read the documentation that your IDE gives you. So hue is from 0 to 65535, one full loop of the color wheel, saturation, default to 255, brightness default to 255. That's what we want, but it does not seem to be showing me any pixels. So let's try this. Let's try a smaller number here, and let's see if that works. Nothing. No colored pixels. Oh, that's because I'm not actually drawing any pixels. Here we go. I'm just generating a color without doing anything. So X, Y, use my color in here. We're going to send our hue back up to 65535, and we're going to try it one more time. And this is going to give us a different style of randomly colored pixels, and these are going to be much more like rainbow random and a little bit less pastel random. So, and one other thing I will say about the HSV color space is if you space it evenly from 0 to 65535 across, say, 32 pixels, you are going to get you're going to get a rainbow effect. So the skills check for this video is going to be something a little bit different. I am going to ask you to use the HSV color space to make a rainbow gradient across the matrix. You can do that from left to right. You can do that from top to bottom. Or if you're feeling very ambitious, you can do it from corner to corner. But I want to see you fill up the pixels of your matrix with a rainbow gradient. You're going to have to play around with the HSV color space. I haven't super explained how it works in this video. I want you to spend some time playing around with this number right here, the hue, which is going to be between 0 and 65535. You'll need to do that to understand how to build the rainbow gradient. So when you are done with this, when you've finished watching this video, you can start on the skills check. If you have any questions or any problems while you're working through the skills check, raise your hand. Once you're done with that, you will be ready to move on to the next video.